In my earlier lecture video, in which I dealt with the Victorian age, I informed you that the writers of the age reacted variously to the fast-paced development of England. Some celebrated the progress, while others felt that it was gained at a terrible price by abandoning the traditional rhythm of life. With this backdrop, I continue my lecture on Victorian novel. The 18th century saw the emergence of the English novel, but it was in the Victorian period that it reached its peak of maturity and versatility. The novel in the Victorian age occupies the same place which the drama held in the days of Queen Elizabeth. Though the Victorian age produced many poets, it was predominantly an age of prose, and the novel became the most popular form. The rapid growth of Victorian fiction owes to different factors: social, cultural, and literary. In most of the cases, the major Victorian novelists intended to satisfy the moral and aesthetic demands of the contemporary middle classes. The middle class preference for prose fiction was also determined by various journals and literary magazines. Initially published for the most part in serial form, novels subsequently appeared in 3-volume editions, or 3-deckers, or large, loose, baggy monsters, as Henry James would call them. Thus, all of Dickens' novels and many of those of his contemporaries were published in serial form. Among the major novelists of the Victorian age are Charles Dickens, William Makepeace Thackeray, Bronte sisters, Anthony Trollope, Meredith, George Eliot, Thomas Hardy, and others. Certain generalizations about the novels of these writers are true and equally applicable. The main outline of the Victorian novels is the same. As the site suggests, Victorian novels sought to represent a large and comprehensive social world, with a variety of classes, social settings, multitude of characters and incidents clustering round the figure of a hero bound together by an intrigue and ending with wedding bells. They reveal the author's vision of the structure of the social world. Most of the Victorian novelists identified themselves with the social, moral, religious, and industrial problems of their age and were its spokesmen. They presented themselves as realists. The novels that they produced were truly national and may be called a mirror wandering down a road. Thus, the Victorian novelists were philosophers, humorists, psychologists, artists, all rolled into one. The Victorian novels were not purely for art's sake. They were used for social reforms. The novels projected the social evils, injustice, and class discrimination. David Copperfield and Oliver Twist are best examples. In Vanity Fair, Thackeray launches attack after attack upon the snobbery and bad social values of the time. George Eliot, herself a radical, is essentially a social critique. The omniscient narrator provided comments on characters and plots and created rigid barriers between right and wrong. Without exception, the Victorian novelists were master storytellers. The plot of their novels may seem improbable, but they keep one on tenterhooks. The range of the novels is large, and so is the mood. They not only dealt with the fortune of the chief characters, but also gave a panoramic view of the whole society. It was a society where the material conditions of life indicated social position, where money defined opportunity, where social class enforced a powerful sense of division, yet where chances of class mobility existed. Thus, Pip can aspire to the great expectations that provide the title for Dickens' novel. Jane Eyre can marry her employer, a landed gentleman. Most Victorian novels focus on a protagonist whose effort to define his or her place in society is the main concern of the plot. The novel thus constructs a tension between surrounding social conditions and the aspirations of the hero and heroine, whether it be for love or social position. This tension makes the novel the natural form to use in portraying woman's struggle for self-realization in the context of the constraints imposed upon her. For both men and women writers, the heroine is often the representative protagonist whose search for fulfillment emblematizes the human condition. From the beginning of the 19th century, the novel was more than a fertile medium for the portrayal of women. Women writers were, for the first time, not figures on the margin, but major authors. Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, Elizabeth Gaskell, George Eliot all helped define the genre. It concerned the domestic life the women knew well, courtship, family relationships, and marriage. The Victorian novel was extraordinarily various. It encompassed a wealth of styles and genres from the extravagant comedy of Dickens to the Gothic romances of the Bronte sisters. From the satire of Thackeray to the probing psychological fiction of Eliot, from the social and political realism of Trollope to the sensation novels of Wilkie Collins. Artistically also, the Victorian novels were very impressive. They are the products of the creative imagination of supreme degree. The material of the novels is the world of human beings and their relations to each other. The Victorian novelists almost create a new world with the help of their imagination, and so their novels are all pictures. Dickens' London, covered with fog with its shabby, glamorous, cheerful streets. Thackeray's London with its clubs and parks. Mrs. Gaskell's countryside, all present unforgettable scenery. The Victorian novels are full of humor. Mr. Micawber, Mrs. Proudie, Captain Costigan are all comic in different ways. Another important feature of the Victorian novels is the range of characters which is inexhaustible. The novelists are able to make their characters live so that the novels linger in the memory not as stories but as crowds of breathing, crying, laughing, living people. Although stained by immaturity and inefficiency, the Victorian novels were irresistible outcome of a new and major channel of literary expression, vital and imaginative to the highest degree. If you have any question, you can post it in the comment box given below. Thank you and have a nice day.